Welcome to this episode of Tools, Talents, and Techniques. I'm your host, Dustin Sutton, and today we're honored to host Mr. Ralph Parent. He's a real estate developer in Boston, Massachusetts, and everything that I've learned about him over the past couple of years and having conversations with him and following what he's doing, it's just extremely impressive to see his trajectory and having a conversation about how he got to where he is. I feel like there's a lot of lessons that I found really useful, so hopefully listeners will find this useful as well, because he talks about growing up in low-income housing, but in and around an affluent area, and then how the lessons that he learned from his relationships and from sports, and then going into the business world and having to, create audibles and adjustments and figure things out, and to where he is and what he's doing. It's just an honor to share this platform and highlight him and what he's doing and who he is as a person. So without any further delay, here he is, Mr. Ralph Parent. Ralph Parent, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dustin. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time and sharing your story and all the things that you're working on. I will have provided an intro before this conversation to our listeners, but where would you like to start in talking about your journey?
Wherever you'd like. You tell me. It's the simple part is I've been an athlete majority of my life. I went to Boston College, played football there, and had a cup of tea with the New York Jets. Then after my career ended, went into the 9-to-5 world, and now I'm in real estate. I've been in real estate now for about 11 years.
So where I would like to start is where you grew up and how you grew up. Like, what did you see in your life where you wanted to be when you were an adult? What was your career idea, if any?
Well, I born and raised Boston, and I moved into a suburb right outside of Boston called Brookline. And, Brookline, very, very educational, a very strong education system. And they really prepared me. I was gifted, as I mentioned earlier, athletically, and, getting the necessary grades, earning a full ride to BC. Career aspirations, I never really had career aspirations. I've been a 3-sport athlete majority of my life, but one thing I knew was football, sports was going to end. So I made sure that I had the educational tools in my back pocket, so when that time came about, that I was able to pull it out and start using, what I've learned over the years. So up until age, say, 24, 25, I was fully engaged in sports. Baseball, basketball, football, sometimes hockey.
When you were in middle school, grade school, middle school, and you were playing sports, kids being kids, was that when you realized that sports was only part of that? Was that something your parents taught you, or how did you develop that mindset that it wasn't the full picture of what you wanted to do?
First, parents. My parents immigrated from Haiti. And education is very, very big in my family. I'm the first sports person in my family. Soccer is the predominant sport. But when I introduced basketball, football, baseball, they did not know where and how to fit in. And luckily, I was blessed and I was gifted with athletic skills. So it first started with family. When I started going to school in Brookline, athletics was kind of secondary. You were here to go to school. So I grew up on the forefront known as a student athlete, but I was trained, very much as a student first. Most people say it's you're there as an athlete and the student part is secondary, but Brookline took the student part very, very serious. And that's how, I took that same mentality into Boston College. And yeah, although I was there on full scholarship, the back of my mind, get your education and get it right, because football is going to end.
And you mentioned that your parents were part of that. And do you feel like the faculty, your teachers all shared that?
Very much a community, very much a community. My parents instilled, the mindset at home, but as soon as I was in the four walls of schools, the teachers were relentless. It was about education. That's what you were there for.
On the field, though, so what position did you play, or positions?
I played all positions, but primarily when I was in college, I was a safety.
You were safety? Okay.
I was
All right.
defense.
Okay. Then you go to Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
Was real estate even in your window at that point? Is it something that you were even exposed to yet?
I was exposed to it. Now, Brookline, I may tell you, is a pretty affluent town. So, and I grew up in public housing, and my exposure to real estate was twofold. One, growing up in public housing, you're sitting out and you're looking at multi-million-dollar homes, and you're wondering, why am I here and not there? That was kind of the first side. The second side is many of my friends, their parents were all entrepreneurs or business owners, and they all were in real estate. So at the time, I didn't know real estate as a career, but I was exposed to it a lot. And whether it's on the construction side, and we can get into this a little bit later, my now business partner, Merrill Diamond, who was my Little League baseball coach, he was a real estate developer. So I grew up watching him and not knowing what a developer was at the time, but here I am as a developer. So it kind of, I was groomed into it, for lack of a better word, but it was unintentional.
When you're seeing the difference and you see your friends on the Little League team and their parents and I think this is a great point, because you're exposed to it. And even though you don't know the full scope and picture of it, you still get the perfume of whatever that is on you. And you're like, ooh, what is that? And it opens those doors of interest. Was there any feeling of, because you saw the difference between like, okay, this is where I'm at and these are these guys. Was there ever any feeling of, like, what was it? Was there any ever bitter or feeling like why you're asking, why am I not there? Why don't I have that? But was there any other feelings around that? Yeah. No, I don't want to put words. I also don't want to put words in your mouth, but I can imagine that there's something there.
I didn't feel any resentment toward my peers growing up, because they included me. I used to horseback ride on their parents' dime. I would play hockey. I would go on, family vacations. I would go skiing. I would do a lot of things, and I was very much included. So I don't feel any resentment, I never have toward my peers growing up. I was just making a point that as a young kid, having a family of 7 living in low-income housing, and the family across the street is a family of 3 and they live in a McMansion. I didn't understand that and like why. But it wasn't until I later grew up and said, oh, that house is $2 million. We live in public housing. But I had to grow to understand that. But meanwhile, I was still learning about real estate growing up. And these conversations, they made no sense to me when I was at the dinner table with many of my friends, but I still absorbed it.
When you were in college and you're finding your way, also you're focused on academics. So tell me what that looked like and how you kind of found your path there.
I knew that, well, as a scholarship athlete, you're kind of told these are the majors that you can get or you can take because it's based on your football schedule. Luckily for me, I wanted to get into communications. I know that I wanted to be on TV, possibly a news reporter. So I did receive my communications degree, but I also wanted a technical side too. And so I took, a concentration in computer science and coding. And this is way before coding is a big thing now. I just took it because I felt that I needed more technical skills, mathematics skills. But that's, yeah, I wasn't really, it was one part I was told these are the majors that you can take. It just so happened communications was the degree that I went after, because that's what I wanted to do, and it worked out.
In school, did you play all 4 years, or because then you went to because you played for the NFL for a little bit? So did what was that? What was your college football career like?
I redshirted my first season. I was a 3-year starter for the remaining, and then I was an undrafted rookie by the New York Jets. I made it through camp, practice squad, and then they released me. Then they re-signed me and sent me to the former NFL Europe, and I lived in Germany for 6 months, and I played on the Frankfurt Galaxy.
Oh,
it was
interesting.
there that I had a career-ending injury, and by the time I could rehab the injury, I was already into the following football season, and by then your stock dropped significantly. Not only are you an undrafted player, you're an undrafted player who's hurt, who had to go to a farm league in Germany. So I knew the writing was on the wall at that time. So that's when I just immediately went into the 9-to-5 career.
Well, luckily for you, it sounded like even though maybe playing in the NFL and you had the skills, you had the talent, that wasn't necessarily your dream, though. It didn't seem like you have created a platform for yourself with your education and your community of what you're doing. So, and do you mind me asking, what was the injury?
Hamstring.
Oh, okay.
It was a bad one.
Yeah. So in that, I know I'm sure it was hard to deal with that, but what was that transition like when you were like, okay, I guess it's the writing's on the wall. I guess I got to make this move now. What was that process like for you?
That is a very, very good question. And for the athletes that are listening to your podcast, they can relate, especially scholarship athletes. It was one of the biggest transitions for me, because up until that point, my life was scripted by the sport that I played, by practice, by weight training. And so when I had to get out of that, most students, when they go to college, they'll get an internship. I wasn't allowed time for an internship. That was my training time. So by the time I got out when I was 24, I know I had a communications degree. I knew I had a concentration in computer science, but I had no job experience. I did not know how to interview because I'd never been on an interview before. All the jobs that I had, it was really a friend that said, hey, you want to make a couple of dollars? Sure, I'll make it with you. But I've never sat down and had a real job where I had to report at 9 a.m. And it was a very difficult thing for me to do that, because up until that time, I can read a script and this is what we're going to do. Every practice, every game, these are the plays that we're going to run. All right, the season's over. We're going into winter conditioning. This is what we're going to do, when, and done. Now I'm into the 9-to-5 world where 12 o'clock I go for lunch. I'm like, It was a big shift to me because I didn't have to do that for 24 years of my life, which is all of my life up until that point.
So how did you make that adjustment? How did you, when you came up against this new way of thinking and maneuvering, was there anything that you did that you can draw back on? They're like, oh, I took this step or used this type of, read this book, or was there anything that you used?
Just keep my head down and move forward. As a football player, it's like you have no time to take a step back and think about the form of play. You just need to look at what's in front of you and plan for what's ahead. So to me, it was, if I continue to work and continue to move forward, then eventually something will present itself to me and I can make my adjustments from there. And in football terms, you make your audibles or you make your checks. And that's what I would do. It's okay, this is what's in front of me. I make my adjustment and I adapt to it. And that's the direction that I'm going.
Well, that sounds like your sports lent a great experience into maneuvering into the world. Because even though you mentioned that, I wasn't necessarily prepared for the actual 9-to-5 and these type of things, but even that mindset, I'd imagine that's extremely helpful.
Very, very much. And as you're, relaying the message to me, Dustin, I was thinking, yes, football did have a huge impact, and and it's not. I don't want to discount it, but many of the skills that I learned on the field, I did take them into my professional career. It was just difficult. It was just a little bit difficult transition.
Sure.
You know, during the summer, it's I would eat a very specific amount of calories every day because I know I was burning a specific amount every day. Um, and that's how the summers would be. And then once you get into season, you know exactly what you're doing every single day, inclusive of your classes, because that's what you dare do. But everything was scripted for you. And then next thing you know, you have a cap and gown on, and you graduate. And you're like, wow, when 4 years go by that fast?
Well, I have a question for you because this is something that I've thought about. It's sometimes when you're trying to separate yourself from being, and I'm not saying that you are saying this, but sometimes,
Mhm.
you were like, okay, I'm more than an athlete, and yes, this was a part of my life. And did you ever feel that you had to make a concerted effort, or there was something specific that you didn't want people to look at you as just an athlete, or was that ever cross your mind?
I would say the first quarter of my professional career, I used the athlete card as much as I could. That was
Hmm.
that was the easy conversation that I can have with someone. Everyone wanted to know about, how is it playing against Notre Dame? 80,000 people screaming. How does it feel playing in a bowl game? People want to talk about that. So that was very easy. But as I gotten older, I'm like, all right, now it's kind of that's the last thing I tell a person is that I played football at Boston College. Um, but I eventually, if it comes up, it comes up. But
Yeah.
I won't bring it up first. You'll just find out that I was an athlete, and okay, this is what we're talking about right
Okay. So when you once you finish the football, you get your 9 to 5. What were some of
now.
those first jobs or job that you went into on the professional side?
I skipped a lot. So my first job, my first job was I was a printing salesman. So this is back before the internet like really took off. And I would recruit people who would run printing presses for newspapers and magazines. And I left that position. Then I became a recruiter for accountants. Left that position. I was a recruiter for nurses. Then I said, let's go back into my athletic roots. And I became a physical trainer, uh, which then led me in my physical training days. One of the winningest high school coach in Massachusetts history, John DiBiase, I tried to solicit his high school players, so I trained them. And he said, how about if I just hire you as a gym teacher? And you can be a gym teacher, you can be a coach. I'm like, great, I get benefits now. And that was kind of like my path when it came, to the earlier parts of my professional career. But all the while, not all the while, but I got my real estate license. And that's when real estate really started to pick up for me as well. So I was balancing both being a teacher, a football coach, and a real estate salesman at the same time.
What was the time frame when you were selling the printers, and then the recruiting? What was that time frame? Was this like a 3 year period, 4 year? Like
It
what
was a
was?
3 to 4 year period, 2006 to about 2009, 2010 ish.
Okay, so during the time, was there anything that you learned, except for maybe that you didn't want to do those things anymore? But was there anything that you took from those experiences that led you into the physical therapy, personal training arena?
You just learn how to hustle.
Hmm.
That's when you're in sales and you're in sales and you're just getting started. I never received any formal training in sales. I was just being me. And I pulled my football card out. Everyone wanted to talk. Next thing you know, I closed the deal. And that's how, the first part of my career happened was using my football and Boston College card.
Okay.
And then from there, once you start building the skills, now you have to really speak about how can you add value to a company that wants to pay you more. And so that's when I had to transition from, okay, I can't use my football card anymore. I need to actually quantify the reason why you're going to be paying me X amount of dollars.
Sure. Well, that's a good lesson in itself, having to figure that out
Mm-hmm.
right there. So, okay, then you go and you become the on staff, and that's when you got your real estate license.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about that time that led you to real estate? Because it looks like some of these other items that you were working on or towards, and then you do this, and then you just throw out this real estate. Like, what was
I
the
take
impetus for that?
I take that back. One of the other jobs that I had in that was I worked as a mortgage broker. And so this is when the subprime mortgage time was happening. And one of the first deals that I closed was a no income, no asset verification loan. So I learned about the mortgage industry, and that knowledge, which I didn't really understand. I mean, looking back at it, that's what got me into buying real estate when I was this is right after the crash. So before the crash, I was selling mortgages. Crash happened. Then I took that knowledge of, okay, this is how mortgages work, and started buying properties.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a combination of being a school teacher, real estate salesman, and buying 3-family assets when I was young, not knowing what I was doing, but it was a simple math to me. This is how much a mortgage is. These are the payments that go into it. This is how much rent I'm getting. Okay, your gross, take away, expenses. That's what you have. And that's how I got into real estate.
Was there anybody else that was doing this with you at the time, or was this just something that you were like, I'm going to take a swing at this?
Just me. It's just me.
It
made sense to me.
Did you make the connection yet between like your friends and their families or parents of the people you grew up with, and making that connection with what you're doing now with what you learned, or at least you touched upon when you were, or had exposure to when you were younger?
Yeah, not at the time. Not at the time, because my friends' parents, they were more into commercial real estate. So they owned buildings, like large commercial buildings, where I was focusing on residential. But again, I didn't make that connection of maybe I'm following my childhood education. It wasn't until I started getting into development with my now business partner. But back then, he was mentoring me. If you're building properties, this is what you need to do. And this is what I was doing when I was coaching you in baseball. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what developing is. Now I'm skipping careers, but I'm explaining how where I am now, there's a history to it that has kind of led me, whether intentional or unintentional. That's what's got me here.
Well, absolutely. This is one of the reasons why this podcast is what it is. It's tools, talents, and techniques. So people can talk about what talent, the tools that they use to find success, or how they utilize their talents, and what techniques they use to help propel themselves forward. So everything that you're explaining, like, yeah, this is fantastic. This is exactly what this is about. So now you're buying properties. Are there any tools that you're using that helped you, in anything that you've learned in that process that maybe our listeners could find value in?
It was really just simple math. I was selling mortgages, and this is what the mortgage was. And many of the things that had happened during the crash, and again, I was selling subprime mortgages. I learned about ARMs. I learned about fixes. I learned about how people leverage their properties, what's good, what's bad. But no one saw that the crash was going to happen. But when the crash did happen, then I had a chance to look back and say, okay, these are the many reasons why the crash happened. So when I started buying properties, I made sure I did the opposite of that. And so I would focus more on fixed loans and making sure that I was getting the rents that I was needed to pay off the expenses and the debt service, and holding assets from there. So I just went against the grain because I saw what people were doing prior to the crash. And those are the skills that I learned. Is really simple math. Where it was a bit difficult was actually in the management of properties. Now, instead of being, zeros and ones, you're dealing with people and emotions, where you're getting a phone call at 12 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning that, your toilet's clogged. Like, those are things that I couldn't control, and I had to learn on the spot.
Do you feel like your experience in the sales and recruiting and those things, do you feel like anything that you learned then and having to hustle helped you out
All of
in
it
the
has.
management?
All of it has. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I feel like I've experienced a lot in when I went from sales
Hmm.
into leasing and then management, whether it be on the residential or the commercial side. It's like learning how to connect with people and help figure out that you really are on the same team and you're trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to solve a problem. I feel like a lot of times working in the sales experience really came in handy
Hmm.
when dealing with those situations. How did you get from buying these couple houses, these properties on the residential side to what you're currently doing? And I want to make sure that we take this opportunity to really dive into the current projects that you're
Sure.
working on. Whatever you can share. I know you got a lot of good
Yeah.
stuff coming on, so I want to make sure I don't put you in a corner and say like, oh, I'm not supposed to say that. But I know you have some
No,
really cool things that you're working on, so I'd love for you to share that part of your journey.
great, and I appreciate the platform, to speak of it. So I I started off with owning properties, and then folks would ask, "Hey, Ralph, do you know a real estate agent that I can work with?" Well, I'm a real estate agent, so I started helping out um, buyers and sellers. Then I started working more with developers and finding them land, finding them buildings. They would fix it, and I would sell it. A skill that I learned during that process was permit expediting. So I knew many folks at the building department, zoning board of appeals. I wouldn't call myself a community activist, but I know the folks in the community who would actually approve or disapprove of the project. I became like the go-to person for many of the smaller scale developers to get their permits for their buildings. So that was a very, very unique skill. And that's all about relationships with government officials and elected officials, to get things, completed. Um, and then I realized that, you know what, if I can vertically integrate and do it all, then I can increase my margins. So I started finding properties for developers. Then I would consult the permit expediting. Then I would work with developers, and then I would sell their properties for them. Okay, let's take this another level. How about if I find the property on my own, permit it on my own, develop it on my own, sell it on my own? And so that's kind of where it transitioned to. Up until, say, 3 years ago, I had a cap. I was a young professional starting a new family. There's only so much money that, you can really put into developing real estate. So about 3 or 4 years ago, my now business partner, Merrill Diamond, called me up and he said, "Ralph, I've been mentoring you through this whole process. It's time for you to step it up. You have all the tools. Stop with the 1, 2, and 3 family homes. Let's start doing 60 unit buildings." Okay, great. That's a great opportunity. And how he phrased it was really cool. He said, "Ralph, again, I've been mentoring you through this. The pilot has gone on to the audio system and said, I'm on my descent and I want a smooth landing and I'd like to land with you." I'm like, cool. So 3 years ago, I did.
It's a good answer. Cool. I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm in.
So 3 years ago, there was a 61 unit project that he had started with another team called Urban Spaces out of Cambridge. Urban Space has been in business now for about 20 years. They do a lot of multifamily residential, and they brought me into the project about midway through and said, "We're going to put you on as assistant project manager, get you to understand how to do large scale real estate development." And that was the first project that I did with them. And we're now transitioning into the next phase. Many of our projects are going through entitlement right now, so they haven't broken ground yet. But we have a project that's going to be starting in the beginning of September. This is a very, very high-end product, 50,000 square feet, 12-unit building, average unit size about 3,300 square feet. The average per square foot sellable is about 1,300. So these condos or these townhouses are going to be selling between 3.8 to 4.8 million dollars. And that was the next iteration of working, with my team members. So I've done 60 unit buildings. We're doing a very, very high end luxury product. 2024, we're going to break ground on a 90 unit project. And we have a couple more projects at the end of 2024 that we're going to be breaking ground as well. So that's kind of the development side. So I've explained the development from the 1, 2, and 3 that I was doing on my own, transitioned into doing 60-unit, multi-family buildings, and now doing luxury. And the next phase that I'm implementing in parallel with my development is syndicating. And I'm sitting at these tables with my partners, very big hearts, helping me out, teaching me about development. And it was an honest question. I was like, why are there no Black and brown people at our table besides me? I appreciate being here, but I'm the only one here. And the difficult part is, as you know, Dustin, in this level of real estate, you sub out a lot of work. And a lot of the work that was being subbed out was to white men. And so that's when I started to learn about the networks. And Ralph, I've been working with these folks for, 10 to 20 years, what have you. And, it'd be hard to deviate from that relationship. Well, I'm just like, well, there's a lot of Black and brown folks that are very, have a lot of skills, and they're just not, given an opportunity. And I'm not saying to give them a job, but just give them a shot, see what they can do. So instead of putting the onus on my partners, which is a little bit outside of their warehouse, but they're very much open to it, I said I'm going to put it on myself. So that's when I started my syndication for this project that we're going to be doing in Brookline. Namely, I want to get Black and brown folks invested in large commercial real estate. The numbers that I'm used to seeing now on these projects and what it costs or what it takes to raise capital, fund a project, pre-development, what it takes to close on a project, tens of millions of dollars in construction loans, those type of things, and seeing what the returns are. I said I wanted to get Black and brown folks invested, but I didn't have the tools. So I spoke with my partners. Can you guys teach me how to do this? And they said, of course. This is how you set up a syndication. This is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to be working in parallel with us. And if folks want to invest with you, Ralph, great. And we have our own investors. We're all going to be pulled in together in the SPE, and we're going to go build this project together. So then a light bulb, went off in my head. And I said, you know what? I can take this and I can replicate it and go to other development teams. Because by now, I know so many other developers that do large scale too, that I'm now in conversations with them and say, you know what? I want to syndicate and be part of your projects because I know your track record too. And I just needed to know what your returns are. I just need to know how you operate. Because you know what? If I can pull minority capital together to give us a chance to get higher returns, as opposed to, having our money sitting in a savings account, I'd like to do it. There's no obligation from anyone. But since I'm in the position and I have access to these opportunities, I want to provide it to, Black and brown folks where we haven't had those opportunities before.
When you're talking about the syndication and being able to do that, there's a couple things that you said that I was just writing some notes down here that I want to make sure that we cover. So number one, I think it's fantastic that you took initiative and you're like, wait a minute, why am I putting the onus? Like, I need to do this myself, and you did that. But there's another part of that too, where you have the relationship and the comfort level with people that you can say, this is what I'm thinking. Can you help me work through this, think through this, process this? And you're able to do that. When you talk about syndicating deals and then you're like, I'm going to do this this way, and hopefully it can replicate or will replicate it. And you're asking these questions, what are some of the challenges, or were some of the challenges that you faced in actually implementing these things? The feedback that you've gotten, what you're doing, what are some of the challenges or obstacles that you see?
Well, before I answer that question, one word really stuck out: relationships. And you just mentioned that right now. I would not be where I am right now without the relationships that I've built and I've cultivated over these years. and it's huge. Like I said, for my partners, there's no reason for them. For my partners, there's no reason for them to do this, and they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They are a very profitable business, and they don't have to do it. They're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I do bring value outside of, my melanin to their projects. Challenges, you're always going to face challenges, and some of the challenges that I had to face, but I didn't have to shoulder them, which is key. Doing a smaller project and you're getting a set of architectural plans for $5,000, $10,000 is one thing. Doing these projects, architectural plans for a full set is about $800,000. Putting a down payment on a property to go through due diligence, on a 5,000, 7,000 square foot lot, $10,000, $15,000. Putting a deposit down, whether it goes hard or not on these larger projects, could be north of $250,000. So the scale really is large when it goes from single family homes to these multifamily buildings. So if there had to be a challenge, I would say if I were to do this alone, it would very much be a challenge for me. But I also know my other skills in syndicating, and I can look at a transaction and I know the right questions to ask a person to gauge their interest and say, listen, I've got this project under agreement. I can flip it to you, and wholesale it, or we can get it permitted together. We can sell it, a fully permitted project. I built those skills over time. So when I look at challenges, and as a developer, that's your job, is to overcome challenges, because that's just the nature of the business. I just learned how to ask the right people who have, what I need to accomplish a deal, and figure, what? I'd rather split the profits with you than, try to take this on 100%. It makes no sense. Development is all about folks coming together, pulling their money together, pulling expertise together, resources together to get a final outcome. And that's what I do.
It's a team sport.
It is.
I feel like, having these conversations and seeing how it all weaves together, right? And all those things that you learn, and you talk about before when you mentioned, audibles and adjustments, and having the hustle and do all those things and working together and communicating and relationships. Mm-hmm. It's all connected, and more than anything else, congratulations on all these things.
Thank you.
I just kind of skipped over that, but you're doing some really fantastic work and some fantastic projects here. That being said, and you have a great team, you're doing things. Is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners and just the world on like what you're looking for, or anything that somebody can help or support or need to look out for in what you're doing?
That's a good question. And the work that I do, it won't be so much that I'm asking. I'll change it around and give you an example. So the syndication that I'm working right now, I'm not asking anyone to be part of it. I'm not actively marketing. What I am saying is, hey guys, I have an opportunity, and I have a lot of opportunities coming up. Mm-hmm. Would you like to invest? One, you've got to be accredited. And if you don't know what that means, I'll teach you. Do you have the capital? I'm simply saying I've been given an opportunity, and I have a lot of access to teams of real estate developers. I have a lot of access to cash. I have a lot of access to opportunities. And if you want to join it, if you want to be part of, my growing team, to be part of these transactions, I'm going to invite you, so long as our interests align. But I'm not here asking for anyone to be part of it. I mean, that you make that own choice for yourself. I just don't, because there's enough stress that comes along with this business, and I'm accepting a lot of stress managing people's money, as a syndicate, to go into a project. So I won't go into a project if I'm not putting my own capital in it. both as a development team and as an investor. If you want to be part of my team that's investing in these projects, then it's projected to get higher returns. Great. No one here is twisting your arm though.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the main reason that I wanted to have this conversation, and I'm impressed by what you're doing, and I want other people to know about you and what you're doing, because I talk to a lot of people doing a lot of great things, a lot of cool things, and to be able to share my platform and highlight people that are doing things that I'm really impressed by is a big part of what I'm doing. So whether it's
shout out to you too, Dustin, for putting this together and putting this group together. It's folks like you that
the BCREN, yeah.
To get like-minded people together to push an agenda. This is important. You are an organizer. Well, that's one of your qualities, is that you organize folks. And that's very important. And, that's why I reached out to you. You're a super connector. Hey, Dustin, just letting you know what I'm working on right now. If you know the folks that are interested, we'll go from there. But I'm not going to force you to do anything. But, where we're developing our real estate right now, next to MIT, next to Harvard. I mean, these are pretty affluent areas where a lot of foreigners come in to buy and rent real estate.
Sure.
So whether or if you're in Brookline, which is a super affluent town, that's right in the middle of Boston College, BU, the hospital district, the country club, or the U.S. Open is being played. 2 professional team owners live in the town. That's the area that we build it. So I'm not saying that to be snooty. I'm simply saying that we go into areas that are established. We pay a premium for the land. We pay a premium for the construction. And, there are folks that, are attracted to that product, and that's what we offer them. And that's what I'm just explaining to you, that this is what we do. And if you want to join, great. If you don't, okay. But just know that I'm here.
And that's a big part of it, knowing that you are there, because if the adage that you can't be what you can't see, and everything that you're doing, it's on brand for who you are and how you've grown in this industry, and you're doing some really great things. And if my small part, and I appreciate all the kind words, but if my small part is to use my platform to shine a light on what you're doing, so other people can go, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. How do I get there? How do I take that path? And all the things that you shared so far, in this discussion, I think are really valuable for people to learn from and people to utilize to grow. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. I want to make sure I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and talk about like big picture and where you are and where you came from and where you see this going, because your trajectory is pretty astronomical. It's pretty cool to watch. Where do you see this going? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? That sounded like a really cheesy, like job interview question, but like seriously, like where, if you could be anything or do anything, like how big would you build this?
I'm gonna change a question around just a little bit.
Absolutely.
And the reason why I'm changing it, because if I had to break down my life to you, and it would be in 2 and 4 year increments, because I would follow the life cycle of entitlement until development, and then you sell the property.
That makes
sense.
That's
really what my life is. Do I want to be the next Don Peebles? Of course. Like, the guy's like a heavyweight. But there's a lot that I need to do to get to that point. But what I'd like to do is fast forward into like when I'm an elderly person. I've learned a lot. When I look back on my life, and I said I grew up in a very affluent town in low income housing, there's a lot that I was not exposed to. There's a lot of things that I was sheltered from living in the town that I grew up in. And it wasn't until when I got out that I started to live in the inner city that I saw what was happening to Black and brown people. And that's when I was just like, hold on, I have an opportunity. I've been on, the other side. I grew up in Brookline, went to Boston College, and I have a skill that I can, play on both sides of the track, for lack of a better word. And how can I help folks out who look like me? And that's just the course that I've set myself in. Where that leads me, I'll soon find out. Using the football analogy that I did earlier, make an audible, make a check. Where it's good, but if I had to tell you the immediate, I'm going to follow a 16-month cycle of entitlement, 24 months of construction, 6 months of sales or rentals. Move on to the next project. That's going to eventually lead me someplace else. But it's really, how do I help people out that look like myself? Because it was such a culture shock to me coming from Brookline, Massachusetts, and then moving into Dorchester, and I saw people who look like me and what they were going through. I'm like, I need to do my plan. So that's where my course is set. And everything that happens in between happens. And that's the best way I like to answer, my 10, 15, 20-year goals.
I think the fact that you've been so goal-oriented and the things that you're doing and moving forward, and then you being able to take that moment and saying, like, how can I, reevaluating or evaluating where you are and, like, how can I make an impact? And I feel like everything that I've seen you do, and again, all the things that we're talking about today, you are doing that, and it's appreciated. And, again, I love sharing these stories and being able to support people that are trying to make that impact, and you are. So thank you very much. I
appreciate that. And one other thing that I'd like to quickly add, which is important too, it's, a lot of what I discuss and speak about is born out of wanting to help people who look like me. But the work that I do, I don't exclude folks. I was never excluded when I grew up, and I don't exclude people now. So a lot of the work that I do a lot of work with a lot of white people. They're very, very good white people that have helped me out to become who I am today, who continue to promote me and help me out. So I don't want to make this sound like exclude the white people, only the Black and brown people. I don't operate that way. I just learned how to work with everyone. And I have my own personal intentions and ambitions. And how do I work with the folks that are within my circle to help folks out in general? So I don't want to make this sound like it's only a Black or white thing, or it's just helping out Black and brown people. No, I just want to make it clear that I work with everyone. And then how do I help folks in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. 1,000%. 1,000%. Well, Ralph, this has been a fantastic time. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I will share your contact information and your website in the show notes. But in the meantime, is there any other things that you want to leave the listeners with as we head out?
Well, I mean, I guess it'd be my contact information. For the development side of my real estate practice is parentdiamond.com. So like parent, like one parent of a child, and a diamond. That's my business partner's last name. Put the two together, parentdiamond.com. And the syndication business, I'm starting to get my marketing information, completed for that. But Ascending Communities is the name of that company. And again, it's just really building up communities. That's what I'm doing it for, and to help folks out. So there's, 617-304-5727. Get in contact with me. Happy to have a conversation, help out where I can, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, Ralph, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
You.
I'll share all your information in the show notes, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Dustin. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Tools, Talents, and Techniques podcast. We hope you found the conversation insightful and engaging. And if you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your network. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode as we continue to bring you inspiring discussions with industry leaders and pioneers. Stay connected to the latest insights, trends, and strategies across various fields, from business and entrepreneurship to technology and innovation. Your support is vital in helping us reach more listeners and expand our community. So don't forget to leave a review and share your feedback. We appreciate your input and are committed to delivering valuable content that empowers and inspires. To stay updated on future episodes, be sure to follow us on either LinkedIn or our website, suttonrea.com. You can also find us on most podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. Thank you for being part of the Tools, Talents, and Techniques community. We look forward to bringing you more engaging conversations and valuable insights in the future. Until then, keep exploring, learning, and applying these tools, talents, and techniques to achieve your own success.